Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. It's definitely morning for Jim, who's our special guest today. Thank you for joining Prelude's webinar series. Today, we're going to focus on the storage dilemma, and I'll hand it over to Jim Ratichek from AP Logic in a moment. Before we do that, though, I just want to give one or two sentences, quick headlines, overview of Prelude Solutions, who we are, what we do, and how we go about the market. So high level on Prelude, what we do is we focus on technology cost optimization, and it all starts with the Prelude process. And part of that Prelude process is both the Prelude assessment process and also the Prelude procurement process. So the first thing we do is look at all of your technology services, the broad scope of telecom, SaaS licenses, Teams, things along those lines, Zoom, collaboration, all those tools. And we will assess all of them for cost savings first, cost removal, and cost recovery. We average over 30% cost savings for our clients. And as we're working through that process, we often uncover areas where there might be a technology upgrade needed or a change in service. And that's when we work through the Prelude procurement process. So the goal is to find money with the existing services, whether it's recovery or removal, and that becomes found budget for technology upgrades and new services. Prelude walks our clients through that process very carefully. And, if we're fortunate enough to earn someone's business, we do make a donation to a social service not-for-profit, with most of our engagements. So that's who we are and what we do. And when it comes to services that Prelude could help an organization procure, the broad scope, those definitions are on the left side of this slide here, but it might be expense management, it might be phone service, SIP, PRI, UCAS, CCAS, all that fun stuff, but also a lot of niche services like IoT services, AI readiness, which is more important than AI services. Maybe it's cellular, wireless, things on those lines, all kinds of cybersecurity, again, core products and niche products. Okay, so that's who Prelude is and what we do. If anyone is interested in having a little bit of a deeper dive conversation, we'd love to. But the focus of today's conversation is on the storage dilemma. And Jim Ratichek from AP Logic is here. And Jim, I'm sure at some point you're going to cover this in the conversation. Actually, before I go to you, one quick for the attendees in the Q&A. Please ask any questions. We have a few topics we want to cover, but we want to understand, what the attendees want to cover as well. So, please during the presentation, feel free to add some questions in the Q&A. And Jim, what I get a kick out of when we chat is your junk drawer analogy, right? You always talk about how, there's sprawl, right? But don't let your storage become your kitchen junk drawer. So, not sure we're going to cover that today, but that always gives me a smile when you cover that topic. So, with that being said, I want to hand it over to Jim Ratichek, and we will focus on storage with Teams and SharePoint.
Awesome. Thanks, Bob and Haley. You guys do a great job. And just to say, Bob and Haley and their group at Prelude does a really nice job of setting up these webinars. They're structured, they're organized. So anyone else that wants to do it the way they do it, and you'll do well. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Great partnership there. So we're here today to talk about a challenge that all of us encounter. I've had it in my business. All of you probably deal with it at some level. I call it sort of the hoarder's dilemma. I'll jump into the slides here in a second. But almost all of us live in a situation where we have too many messages, too much data, too many different channels where we're communicating, and a lot of places we store files, whether that's in our documents, on our desktop, in OneDrive, in SharePoint, in Google Workspace, Box, whatever you might have. What AP Logic does is most of our clients are struggling with that level of frustration with their file storage. They don't know how to manage permissions. They don't have a good framework for fixing it and then keeping it clean. We refer to the hoarder's house. So that's kind of what Bob was talking about. We say that on the one hand, we have the hoarder's house where we keep all of the kind of information floating around in today's world. And what we're hoping to build is the dream home for our clients. And so what our company does is we help people move out of the hoarder's house into the dream home by not only moving their stuff, but architecting the dream house. Where is your data going to live? Where are we going to message each other? Are we going to use email? Are we going to use chat? Are we going to post in Teams? How are we going to do it? And then sticking to that over a period of time, because it doesn't do any good to move out of the hoarder's house and move into your dream data home if all you do is start hoarding again and make a big mess. And we have plenty of stories about customers that have gone through 3 or 4 iterations before they came to us and really developed an organized method for tracking all of their unstructured data. So with that, let me jump in here, and then I'm going to ask you guys a couple questions to start off. Let me go ahead and share. So the unstructured data dilemma. What we mean by unstructured data are files, notebooks, messages, emails, not things that live in like an ERP or a CRM system. And what we're here to do today particularly is talk about those files and how we use the tools, OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint. And we can also get into a little bit of SharePoint, a little bit of Teams messaging, chat versus posts, things like that. So I want to ask you all a question. Do you particularly want to stay focused on files in OneDrive and SharePoint, or do some of you want to get into how you chat and post in Teams? If you could put it in the Q&A, just kind of give an answer, just files only, or chat and post. That way I can orient this. I've got way more material than I can cover in 20 or 30 minutes. So I want to make this, tailored to what you guys all want to do. I don't know if you
yeah, so Jim, if you want to continue on for a slide or two,
let's
then
go ahead.
I'll let
Sure.
you know what comes in. Yep.
So there's 3 steps to getting focused in Microsoft 365. And the first thing that all of my clients ask me is, what tools should we be using for what? We've got OneDrive, particularly we've got SharePoint for file storage. Then we've got Teams. We're not really sure where that comes into the mix. If we save files in Teams, where do those go? So we're going to address that. Second thing is structuring the data. Once we know what tools we're using, we've got to have the data in the right place. We got to have the right permission levels on it so people can access, what they should and not what they shouldn't. And then finally, we have to get users to understand the tools and use them. Turns out, interestingly, when you structure data well and when your team is involved in that, user adoption is not that difficult. So those are the 3 things we're going to cover. I'm going to jump into a couple techniques. And one last thing. By the way, on average, our clients, when they come to us, are losing about 90 minutes a day. We survey them. We ask them a bunch of questions. We have reports on that. They're losing about 90 minutes a day to either requests for data that they shouldn't have to answer, or just losing files, trying to find things that they need to find. So how many times a day do you go looking for something that you can't find, or does someone interrupt you when they should have been able to find the data on their own? And we multiply that out. Also, about 90% of our customers' files are unused. Those 90% get archived. So after a real serious data cleanup, you should be down to something along the lines of 10% of the files that you have in an existing system coming in. Obviously, that doesn't hold true for every business. Sometimes it's 70%, sometimes it's 98%. But let's take a look at what tools we've got here. Bob, did you have any responses?
I was going to say it's mostly files is where the consensus seems to be. Yeah.
Let's focus on that. Let's take a look at some tools. SharePoint, OneDrive, we'll kind of lay low on the Teams chat and channels. And then, of course, there's a lot of other tools in Microsoft 365 we're not going to cover today. But if you want to pop your hand up at some point and ask some questions, Bob's going to take the data down, and we'd be able to set up a call with you later to discuss some of the other tools that are in 365 and what you should be using. Let's take a look at file storage real quick. So you've all asked about that. Biggest question we get when I come into an engagement, I just did a workshop yesterday, a 4-hour workshop. Biggest question was, OneDrive versus SharePoint versus Teams. What are these different tools for? So OneDrive basically is your personal desktop in the cloud. And it has serious limitations, but a lot of people use it because it's what Microsoft has promoted the most. They've talked about OneDrive. There's a little OneDrive sync, a little cloud down in the bottom right here. You'll see that. And then SharePoint is our corporate file system in the cloud. So that's basically what used to be your file server, but in the cloud. And Teams is actually really easy. Teams just stores its files essentially in SharePoint. The way it works is when you create a team in Microsoft Teams, whether you know it or not, you're actually creating a SharePoint site and a permissions group. So that team contains, that team is going to save those files in that SharePoint site, and you'll be able to access those from SharePoint, from your desktop, mobile, from Teams, et cetera. So there's a lot of different places. The beauty is there's one file in one spot. It's just different windows into that room. Let me explain one thing that I think is confusing for everybody. Take a look at that little blue cloud that I have there in the bottom right-hand side of my slide. That's the synchronization app. Have you ever been, if any of you, can you pop up your hand if you've ever been in SharePoint or in Teams and you said, hey, I want to sync this to my desktop, and it says syncing to OneDrive and it opens up OneDrive? Any of you can raise a hand if you've had that experience? Yep, exactly. And so the reason that's so confusing is because Microsoft branded their sync app as OneDrive. So that little app in the bottom of your system tray is really, they should have called it the sync app, but they called it OneDrive because I guess they had branding confusion. It's not the first time they've done it. And what happens is when you sync from any of their cloud repos, in this case, you can see in my slide, SharePoint and OneDrive, they both sync through the OneDrive app, but essentially the user experience is the same. I have a lot of people come to me and say, I don't want to put my files into SharePoint because I want to control them. I want to leave them in my OneDrive. I like the experience. The reality is you can do the exact same things with SharePoint you can do with OneDrive and more. So for example, I lead my business. I have almost none of my files in OneDrive. All my corporate files are in SharePoint because as a centrally managed IT resource, it's much easier to actually control how those files are managed. And if I either get on a bus, go on vacation, or I get hit by a bus, I say buses are bad for business. If that happens to me, it's much easier for the IT staff to get those files or access them, or for other members of my team to see the presentation, the financials, whatever it is that's in SharePoint, and actually allow others to share and see and manage them. We also have better document governance in SharePoint than we have in OneDrive. I don't know if you all know this, but OneDrive, all your OneDrive accounts, even if you have like, let's say the sales OneDrive, it's actually an account that's associated to your user. So that's the problem, is Microsoft architected it. So OneDrive, I am Jay Ratichek at AP Logic. My OneDrive is associated to my user. I have to manage it and control it and share it. I don't want that. I want the IT staff to manage where the files live and the permission levels and the document governance. That's the reason we put things into SharePoint. I'd be glad to elaborate that on a little bit more on how that works. And like I mentioned earlier, Teams is just a tool. Teams is just a window into SharePoint. So when I go ahead and open up my Teams, which I'm going to do here for you in just a second, and show you a quick sample of what that looks like. When I go in here and I go into a team, and I'm going to actually use sales team here. I'm in my team and I'm going to jump into my general, and let's grab some files and take a look here. You can see that right there on the screen. That is my team, and I'm going to go ahead and grab my file explorer here, and that is a link into SharePoint, and then I'm going to grab SharePoint itself. So you're going to see all of these things on the screen at once, and you're going to see that all these files are in the same exact spot. So I'm going to go ahead and click here, and I'm going to click here. And you can see on the screen right now, is there anybody that can't see the screen or the font is too small for you? Can you raise your hand? Okay, I guess everybody can see it. Right here, I'm in the exact same place in both locations. This is a window into my SharePoint. I've synchronized it to my desktop. I'll go ahead and pull up the actual SharePoint site as well, so you can see that. Here we are. So all three of these, SharePoint is here in the forefront. Teams is right here on the left, and my file explorer is using the OneDrive sync to SharePoint. All of them are looking at the exact same file in the exact same place with the exact same permissions. I can move this file, I can add a file here, and you're going to see it happen exactly everywhere else. In fact, let's go ahead and do something just for fun, just to show you how it works. Let's go ahead and we're going to add a document. We're going to call it Jim's little demo document. We're going to put it in here, and in a minute that's going to pop up in a few other locations. It's going to pop up over here in Teams. It's also going to pop up in SharePoint, because everything lives in SharePoint. Any questions on that so far?
Jim, I do have a. I'm sorry. I have a question. I also have a question from an attendee.
Sure.
So I'll ask my question second. But can you talk about like Dropbox or another tool similar to that, and how that,
Sure.
integrates, and, ease of use versus, difficulty, compared to SharePoint, please?
Yep. And just
And then
real
I'll
quick,
ask my
notice
question. Yeah.
that Jim's little demo document. Notice it popped up in all 3 windows, right? Each of these is just a window into SharePoint. That document lives in one place. So I just want you all to see that. Okay, so as to Dropbox and other tools, most of these tools will integrate with Microsoft at some level. I'm going to go ahead and delete my little demo there. Most of these tools will integrate with Microsoft at some level. None of them integrate as well as the native apps like SharePoint does. And so the trick with any of these tools, and there are things like Ignite. So many of you might have heard of Ignite. Ignite is one that's used a lot by engineering firms with CAD files. CAD files are particularly difficult when it comes to sharing them and managing them through SharePoint. So a lot of people will use Ignite. There's all kinds of other tools, Dropbox and Box. Here's the number one thing I hear all the time about those is I hear it's so easy to share. So Google Drive, Dropbox, etc. It's so easy to share. Why is SharePoint difficult? That's actually pretty easy to explain. Let me jump into a little further into the presentation here, and I'll show you some reasons why. So access and permissions is a big one. Take a look at this. So when we look at governance, SharePoint defaults to not using what we call anyone links. An anyone link is a link that we can send out with a file that anyone can click and access the file. Most of these other tools default to allowing anyone to open a link. What's the problem with that? Well, if I send a file out to Bob and he accidentally forwards it, or someone intercepts that email and gets that email, any person that clicks that link can access that file. By the way, we see this with financial firms all the time. We see finance companies sending statements and account updates as a file with an open anyone link, and anyone that clicks that can get it. So there's a lot of liability there. You can take the liability if you want, but with SharePoint, we can set it up so you can do the same thing. It's just not default behavior. So that's probably the biggest single thing we get about why people like Box or G Suite. It's just quote unquote easy. It's only easy because SharePoint's set up to force authentication by default. We can turn that off and we can allow anyone links, and then it's going to work just like G Suite or Box or anything else when it comes to link sharing. As far as the tools themselves, they're all document libraries. They all are document management systems. They all allow you to store documents, set permissions, send them, share them, do all those types of things. Really depends a lot on your use case. It depends on your licensing. If you already own Microsoft licenses, all of this SharePoint stuff and everything I'm showing you is free for the most part. I mean, depending on your license, but most of the licenses, most people are on business premium. Those licenses will give you all the tools I'm showing you without any additional cost. Yes, there are storage limits. We can discuss those later, but it's not that expensive to increase storage in SharePoint. It's relatively inexpensive. So we have a client right now who's coming out of Dropbox. They have 250 users or so in Dropbox, and they're spending a lot more there than they're going to be spending in Microsoft. Did that answer the question, Bob, or is there more detail there? And whoever asked the question, if you want to pop up, and you're welcome to pop up and tell us what your challenge is.
Yeah. And Jim, how about sprawl? Like, how do we unravel sprawl?
Sure.
If we have too many repositories, or if we don't have a good system and nomenclature for the files.
Totally. So going back to here, we're looking at tool selection as our first, and then structure as our second. So let's jump into structure and take a look at that. Okay. So when it comes to structuring, I'm going to skip over the file technical limits in SharePoint for a second. I'm going to jump into governance basics. Actually, let's go ahead and here for the future. So the first thing about sprawl is people don't understand permission levels. When we structure these types of things, we're structuring it from the top down. Here's an example of a way that you might want to do that. So you need to, if you want to structure and avoid sprawl, you have to architect. Let me give you the example. We talked about the hoarder's house earlier. We talked about the dream home. Here's the problem. A lot of companies, when they start into a new file management system, whether that's Microsoft or Google Workspace or whatever, it's like as if you went to Home Depot and you were trying to build your dream home, but you'd never constructed anything. And the salesperson sold you a skill saw and drywall and 2x4s and a nail gun, and you just started nailing stuff together. And there's two problems we see. One is the architecture sucks, frankly. Like, it's not architected. We have sales files here, we have them there, we have stuff from the dustbin of history. The second problem is that people shoot themselves in the hand with the nail gun because they don't know how to use the tools. So as to structure, we have to look from the top down. We actually do a workshop with our clients where we envision the entire organization from the top down, and every room in that proverbial dream home that we're designing when we're going to move out of the hoarder's house into the dream home, every room is intentionally architected and it has an owner. And that gets to Bob's point about the kitchen junk drawer, right? There's no kitchen junk drawer where people throw crap in there and we don't know who's responsible for it. You know, that's the old company S drive. Oh, we don't know how it got that way. It's just been 20 years of crap that piled up. So when we architect the new house, every one of these rooms in the house that you see here would be a team or a SharePoint site. All of them has an owner, and all of them have a document governance and communications policy. What documents go where? What are the naming conventions, et cetera? What's the archival process? What's the document retention policy? And by the way, those are not the same. If we have a little time later, we can get into document retention versus archival. That's a separate thing. But when you structure it from the top down, take a look at this. It's very easy for everyone in your org to see where things live and why. Does that answer your question, Bob, in terms of like the top-down approach?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of work to unravel legacy sprawl, but the architecture here makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah. So what happens next when you're going through this process is when you architect, you also are going to look at what's in your old house. Now, here's what we recommend. This drives user adoption too, but architect the new house, your new file system, your new structure, without too much reference to the old. When we conduct a workshop, we start customers with a clean slate and we literally whiteboard out the new structure for their files and for their teams and channels and posts. And all of it is permissions based. You've got to understand permissions at a high level, because as soon as you start doing permissions 4, 5, 6 folders deep in your structure, it becomes impossible to track. So you're on your way to having, and you're on your way to becoming the hoarder again in your new dream home if you start doing permissions 3, 4, 5 folders deep. You can do it, but it becomes impossible to manage. So archive almost everything. What happens is when people move out of the hoarder's house, on average, our average client is using 20 to 30 files per week at most per person. So you do the math on that. If a company of 100 people, you're at 2,000, 3,000 files total if there's no overlap. Our average client has over small business client has over 500,000 files, and our bigger customers have many millions of files, and 20 to 100 terabytes of data. That stuff, most of it can go away. So almost all of it. We've seen customers who've archived 95 to 98% of all of their old data. So if you do that, that's important. Last thing, let me make a point on archives. When you take a look at this, one of the biggest mistakes we see people make in the world of Copilot is they take all their company stuff and they start archiving into one spot. I can't tell you how many clients we've cleaned up where they archive into one spot. And what they do is they depend on what I call security by obscurity, in the sense that no one's going to look in this big archive dump of crap to see where the owner's old lawsuit is, or their ex-spouse's problems, or whatever they ended up in the company executive drive and then went into archive. We've seen employees that used Copilot to figure out the compensation schemas for the executives or shareholders of the business, because they ask Copilot and it turns out that archive is accessible to everybody, and Copilot goes fishing through the archive and it says, oh, look, here's the owner's old lawsuit data, or here's their compensation data, and it pulls it out and gives it to them. So all of that document governance comes into play. When we archive by permission level. So if we're taking stuff out of an executive team, it goes into an executive archive with the same permissions. That's really important when it comes to information architecture. Otherwise, you will end up with a lot of data breaches and a lot of information going to the wrong people, especially in the age of AI.
I'm sorry, Jim.
Yep.
Can you please restate that? Archive on a permission-based level? Is that what you said? On
Correct,
the same
exactly.
permission-based, yeah.
And for people that are a little more technical in SharePoint, a lot of times what that entails is creating another document library in that SharePoint site with the same permissions. So you have your basic document library in SharePoint. You create another document library. It inherits the same permissions from the Microsoft group. And now we can move files out and put them into that as an archive. You can also implement retention policies in Purview. We're not going to get into that right now. That's going to be a whole nother topic. I can discuss what retention is if people are interested, if you want hands up for people that are curious about what retention is and how it works.
Yeah. And just to be cognizant of time, we have just over 4 minutes left for this session. Everyone who's attended, if there's any additional questions, either place them in the Q&A here, or Jim and I will be available, for a conversation, as a follow-up if needed and desired. So thank you.
let me just real briefly talk to the elephant in the room, which is adoption. When people are going to go into SharePoint, they say, oh my gosh, we've got file servers. There's old people in our company or young people that don't like to change, and they like their little yellow folders. So we like to see folders in a file system in our file explorer, just like this. Here's the beauty of this. You guys see what's on the screen here? Everything under Applied Process Logic Inc. here is SharePoint. That's all SharePoint stuff, and I can make this stuff look and work just like my old file server drives if I want to. So you can sync this using the OneDrive sync, again, the misnamed OneDrive sync that Microsoft has. You can sync these files to your desktop, and for users that really like the regular file experience, which by the way, I use this a lot. I use my file explorer a lot. I can open it, I can name, add, move, do everything with files in File Explorer that I would normally do in SharePoint. There are some technical limitations. So we can't have infinite numbers of files moving infinite places. Microsoft will limit you. But those are things that we help you with during architecture, so you never hit those boundaries. But this little yellow folder thing, I could literally name a SharePoint site. You could have like a G drive on your file server right now. I could name your SharePoint site G drive, and I could create the same folder structure in there. I don't think that's a great idea, by the way. But for people that really are struggling with adoption and fearful about it, this is one of the ways you drive adoption. Another one is hands-on architecture. We just talked about that. If people are involved in designing the dream home, they want to move in. And then finally, believe it or not, throwing stuff out is cathartic. People love the idea of getting rid of all their old crap. And when they start, we have a unique software that allows you to figure out what you're going to throw out. When they start doing it, it becomes sort of like scratching an itch. And then, of course, mobile access and no VPNs. We can get everything I just showed you. You can get all those files and access everything through the SharePoint client on your mobile, Android or iOS. You can access it through the Teams client. You can access it through the OneDrive client. I know. Even SharePoint, you can access through the OneDrive client on your or app on your phone. So all of that drives adoption. People want to move in to their dream home when they're moving out of the hoarder's house, and they can access their files without difficulty. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to stop sharing now. Let's go ahead and any other questions that people have, I can answer those.
Yep. And Jim, in the Q&A, can you just touch briefly upon Teams and chat and what topics you would discuss with an organization? Not so much like what best practices are, but just like a few examples and just how you would approach Teams and chat, just for.
Yeah, so the biggest challenge we see in Teams and any other chat tool is what I call the tyranny of the urgent. It's information overload. If you have more than about 10 people in your company, the chances are you're going to get inundated with emails on the one hand and chat messages someplace else and posts. So what we do is we teach people how to use channels in Microsoft Teams as opposed to just exclusively posting. I'll share real quick and just show you kind of what that looks like. The channel is a place where we can organize information by topic and avoid the tyranny of the urgent, which is your inbox popping up with things constantly. So if you take a look here, I have a sample on my screen. I'll make it a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. So this is an actual project we did, a website redesign project. And in this project, every single piece of data, every file, every message, everything else is here in this channel. And these posts that you see on the screen work just like LinkedIn or Facebook from a post standpoint. You can post, you can delete, you can edit your post, you can like and thumbs up, you can comment. And so my team and my clients' teams will discuss a project like this website redesign project here. All the files are linked to SharePoint right here through this. We have our OneNote. So here's my content files for the website design. We have our OneNote in here. We have open items in Microsoft Planner, but literally there's nothing about this project that isn't in this website redesign channel. There's no other emails, there's no attachments, nothing. Why is this so important? Because I've got one place to go. And if I add an employee to this channel, they can see everything in here. I don't need to forward emails. I don't need to catch them up on stuff. Everything is here. I can post audios from my phone. So I can come along with my mobile device and post an audio in here. We can post images, but the entire project history is right here. Is this perfect for every project and every need? No, but channels are a really great way to focus. And my life is significantly easier since I started using this because I have no internal email. At AP Logic, we do not use internal email. We use Post and we use some chat in Microsoft Teams, and I'm far more focused and far less distracted than before. So single source of truth, one place to go for all the information on a project. Does that answer the question, Bob?
Yep, it does. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we are 1 minute over, but Jim, thank you. Greatly appreciate the information and the approach. For everyone on the on the webinar, more than happy to have a follow through conversation. Just hit me up and we'll schedule time from there. But thank you, Jim. Greatly appreciate it, and thank you everyone for attending. Thank you.
Take care, everybody, and stay focused.